Right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of the meeting. So thank you very much for coming today to the community group meetings. Our second meeting at NAMM as the community group. Obviously, it's been a meeting that Michael has done for many years for MusicXML. So yeah, well, let's just dive straight in. We thought we would begin with just, in case there's anybody in the room who is new to the group, with just a little bit of information about both the community group and the W3C.
Can everybody hear Daniel? Okay.
Yes, if you can't, just come closer. It's fine, I don't smell. So the community group was started in July of 2015. We've now got well over 200 members in the group. That includes a lot of different organisations and individual members. The aim of the group is to develop, at the moment, MusicXML, SMuFL, which is the standard music font layout, and MNX, which is the planned sort of next generation format for music notation representation. A word about how community groups work, because I think it is important that everybody understands how they work. So the W3C, of course, is the organisation that decides internet standards. Obviously, the World Wide Web Consortium is what W3C stands for. And it has a whole number of different activities that it does. It has working groups which are official groups that design real internet standards that then become W3C recommendations. And those can only be worked on by working groups that contain paying members of the W3C. But there is a whole other level of, there's a whole other level of membership of the W3C below the working group level, which is community groups and business groups. And that's basically a way that organisations and individuals can get together to work on things that may one day become part of W3C working groups, for example, like the web audio group that our former co-chair Joe Berkowitz was part of, but they don't require that. Now, in terms of membership of W3C community groups, that membership is free both to organisations and to individuals. And it is very important that if you would like to become involved in the community group, if you're not already, and we hope that you will, it is important that you join the community group. And the reason for that is that one of the benefits of working under the auspices of the W3C is that any community reports that we produce as part of the group, like, for example, the MusicXML 3.1 specification that we released in January last year, like the SMuFL 1.3 specification that we're hopefully about to release, those are then guaranteed to be available to any individual, any company, any organisation that wants to implement them free of charge. So in order to make that possible, it's the contributors to the community group, whether they represent themselves or represent their organisations or businesses, have to basically agree to abide by the terms of the community group, which is that any intellectual property contributions they make to the group and to the work of the group, they basically give over the rights to that to the W3C. So being here in this meeting room today, and we'll have an open discussion about things, we don't think counts as a contribution, so it doesn't matter if you're not a member today. But as we go through, we will discuss how you can actually get involved directly in the work of the group and actually make contributions to the standards that we're working on. And if you would like to do that, which we very much hope that you will, if you're not already involved, then you should join the community group. And it's reasonably straightforward, although both Michael and I did mess it up when we did it to begin with.
Yeah, so the user interface. The hardest thing about joining the community group is the user interface on the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can help you through it.
Yeah, indeed, we certainly can. So the link at the bottom of the slide there, that is our homepage on the W3C website, although most of the actual work is done on GitHub, as we'll talk about as we move along here. So 2018 did see some changes in the group. Originally, the three co-chairs of the group were myself and Michael and Joe Berkowitz, who at the time was at Noteflight and then left Noteflight a little while ago, about a year ago. And we were very lucky to have Joe as one of our three co-chairs. He as well as, of course, all of the expertise that he brought from his time working at Noteflight, he's also very experienced in working within the W3C because he was one of the co-chairs of the web audio working group as well, and responsible for a lot of the wonderful things that the web audio group has delivered. But after Joe left Noteflight, he devoted some of his time to working with us in the community group. But over time, as family commitments changed, and he developed some other interests that were starting to take up more of his time. And he let Michael and I know a little while ago that he wanted to step away from the group. And obviously, we were very sad to see him go because he really had been the driving force behind putting the group together and had done all of the substantive work on the MNX specification, for example, to date. So it was, obviously sad to see him go. So as a result of Joe really kind of stepping away in the latter half of last year, MNX has been a little bit kind of in stasis over that time. Michael and I have continued to meet and talk about things and work on SMuFL in particular, but we haven't necessarily moved it forward so much. However, we are very pleased to say that we do have a third co-chair. Sadly, he can't be with us here today, but it's Adrian Holovati, who is the co-founder of SoundSlice and is also, very well known in the Python community, was one of the original developers of the Django Python framework that lots and lots of websites and things are built on. So he, and SoundSlice, if you're not familiar with it, is a really, really phenomenal web-based music notation and guitar tab product that he's worked on for a long time. So we're very, very pleased to have Adrian as one of the co-chairs, and the division of responsibility will be more or less as it has been, which will be that I will take the lead on SMuFL, Michael will take the lead on MusicXML, and Adrian will take the lead on MNX as it develops going forward. So as the aim of the meeting today is to talk about where we are with our three main projects and to have a discussion to whatever extent we want to discuss each of them. And we do encourage you to, stick your hand up and interject if there's something that you would like to do. But we will also stop at various points, like right now. If anybody has any questions about the organisation of the community group and about the leadership of the community group, then we're very happy to answer those right now.
Adrian had a very good reason for not being at this meeting. Before we invited him to be co-chair, he accepted a gig at the Amsterdam Gypsy Jazz Festival. So he is performing there this weekend.
Yeah, he's also a very, very fine guitarist. Yeah, really excellent guitarist. And he's got some great videos on YouTube, which you should check out. They're pretty awesome.
He does plan to be at our Music Messa meeting.
Yeah, he certainly will. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with SMuFL, which is why I'm in this chair. I'm in the hot seat at the moment. So SMuFL, in case you've not heard of it, is the standard music font layout. It's a thing that I started working on when I went to Steinberg 6 years ago to start working on what became Dorico. The idea behind it is to provide a single sort of source of truth for all the musical symbols that are used in conventional Western music notation, a taxonomy of them, recommendations for how they should be encoded in fonts, and basically a set of guidelines and specifications for font designers who would like to make music fonts and for application developers who would like to implement music fonts.
Oh my God. I said, I think there'll be no problem, I said about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, cool.
I think Philip went over to their booth too, and then this is the result. So.
Yeah, Philip's obviously gone to get the party started. So.
What is going on over there?
Oh,
there we go. That's a little better.
We're
so
Peavy on one side and Mackie on the other side.
Yeah, so there could be many interjections of that sort. So we just have to try and roll with the punches, as it were. So SMuFL, as I said earlier on, and we'll talk a little bit more about MusicXML 3.1 in a moment, we've already released a final community report for MusicXML 3.1. The goal is to now release a community report for SMuFL 1.3, which would then be the first release of SMuFL under the auspices of the community group, which then provides all of those nice protections that I was talking about earlier on, that it's under an open license and is always guaranteed to be implementable, royalty-free, and all that nice stuff. So there aren't really very many changes in terms of the actual specification, like the guidelines for font designers and so on. But we did publish a draft originally, which we then actually finished getting into a community report a couple of years ago. And since then, we've added some new ranges, as you see, things like Kahn notation and German organ tablature, which shows you the breadth of what SMuFL covers. It covers everything from basically, the 9th century pretty much up to the present day, and things that are not only in music notation itself, but also adjacent notations like dance notation. Car notation being special in that it is actually designed to be printed alongside music notation rather than as a kind of totally separate thing. So there's a direct correlation between the steps and the music. There's also been some extensions to some of the existing ranges for fingering, clefs, and so on. That there was the whole stack of issues in our GitHub, and we basically swept up about half of them. And also, because we needed them in Dorico, we've also added some new ranges of recommended stylistic alternates for various things like time signatures and chord symbols as well. Also, some very small changes to the spec. SMuFL also defines, as well as the font itself, it also defines a format for font metadata, which is in JSON, which is the JavaScript object notation format. And there's a little bit of clarification in the spec about some of those things, but it's pretty small beer. When we were talking earlier in the week with Adrian about the meeting today, Adrian suggested it might be useful for some of the people in the room to know what fonts are available that support SMuFL these days. So we've put together a little list. So these are the main ones. There may be others, but these are the main ones that I'm aware of at least. So Bravura is the font that I was working on when we... Yes, don't worry, the slides will be distributed. You don't need to take photos of them. Although you're welcome to, if you like. Yes, that's fine. So Bravura is the first font that that I started working on when I started working on SMuFL, 6 years ago. And so it's kind of designed to be the reference implementation for SMuFL. So if we add a new range to the spec, I have to add it to Bravura. We have had some contributions from other designers other than just me, who are sort of credited in various places. And I'm totally cool with taking contributions to Bravura. That helps me a great deal. And like many of the other fonts on this list, it's licensed under a thing called the SIL Open Font License. And the Open Font License is designed to allow, obviously, the free distribution of fonts. So the nice thing about the OFL is that you can use the fonts in any commercial or non-commercial, closed or open source, proprietary or otherwise software. You can distribute it freely with anything, including on its own. And you can also use it as the basis for deriving other fonts as well. The only restrictions on OFL fonts, the only practical restrictions on OFL fonts, and I'm not a lawyer, so read the license agreement yourself, but the only real practical restrictions are that you cannot sell a font that is licensed under the OFL on its own. So you can sell it, as for example we do, as part of Dorico. It's part of the package, and we sell Dorico and Bravura comes with it. So that's one thing you can do. But you can't sell it. I couldn't one of you guys couldn't download Bravura and then sell it for £5 or something. That wouldn't be allowed. The only other thing you can't do is if you make a derived font or use any of Bravura's data in a font that you create, you can't call it Bravura. There's a system in the OFL for what they call reserved font names, and the person who designs the font or the company that designs the font retains the copyright in the font, but the license then grants a wide range of permissions. The name is one of the things that is copyrighted, so you're not permitted to make a new font and then call it Bravura, which is why, for example, there are quite a few derivative fonts of Bravura, but they're all called something different, and you wouldn't necessarily know they came from Bravura unless you happen to read up about them. As I say, Bravura is designed to be the reference implementation for SMuFL, so it contains all the glyphs and follows, I hope, all of the rules that we define in the specification. Another font that we've worked on, or another font family, is called Petaluma, named after a city here in California, which is a handwritten font. We don't actually currently distribute that on its own. It is only actually distributed at the moment as part of the Dorico package, but we do have a plan to get up on GitHub at some point. It's more a matter of priority than any wish to keep it hidden under a bushel or whatever. Then MuseScore ships a couple of it obviously ships Bravura, for example, but also ships a couple of other SMuFL compliant fonts. It's worth saying that none of the rest of the fonts on this list have complete coverage of the SMuFL ranges. The only font that has complete coverage of the SMuFL ranges that has at least been released anyway is Bravura. So Petaluma, Gutville, MuseJazz, Leipzig, all these other ones licensed under the OFL. They all provide, of course, the common ranges that you would need to do most things, but they probably don't, for example, contain Dacian notation from the 9th century. Probably not. There are also 2 commercial SMuFL fonts that you can purchase. November 2 is one of them. November is quite a famous font that the designer Robert Pierchot did a long time ago as a finale font, and he's updated it to make it work not only with Sibelius but also with SMuFL compliant applications as well. And that's available for purchase from Clem Music in Germany. And then the final one that I'm aware of is MTF Cadence, which is done by sort of another small music type foundry here in the US by a designer called Abraham Lee. Again, it doesn't have all the ranges covered, but it's a very nice font and is available from the Music Type Foundry website. Does anybody have any questions about SMuFL fonts and about the OFL?
Did we leave any fonts out of that list?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know of others that exist, but you can't get them. So,
so you have the 1.3 draft finalized, right?
We do.
You have a copy review before the draft?
So the way that is going to work is that we're it's all GitHub-y basically, and we try to get the draft published ahead of the meeting. But there's a GitHub Pages error that I'm still working with their support guys to do. So, but if you want to, you can look. If you look at GitHub itself, the SMuFL GitHub repo, you'll find that there is actually a whole load of stuff committed on the GH Pages branch, which shows the thing. You just can't serve it from the main GitHub IO website, but it's all there. Sure. Well, obviously, even after we publish the draft, we can still change it. We just have pull requests to change it. So yeah, do if you're interested, check it out. But we'll send out an announcement to the mailing list, the mailing list, and put a blog post up on the website as well when the draft is released. Which we were hoping would be before today, but it's ready. But the GitHub thing isn't working, so we
hopefully
will.
Next week.
Yeah, I hope so indeed. And so, where do we go from here with SMuFL? Well, obviously, the hope is that once we do publish the draft community report, we can basically then proceed from there to a final community report as quickly as possible, hopefully with no changes, but we'll wait and see. However, it's not a done deal. SMuFL is still very much a live project, and if you are aware of particular ranges that don't get coverage right now, or if there's gaps in the ranges, we're very welcome. Your proposals for new glyphs and ranges are very welcome. We already have a bunch of issues in the GitHub repository for things that I didn't get around to or that we decided not to prioritize for this release. So you're very welcome to look through those and let us know, add a comment on anything that you think is more important than I do. And likewise, submit an issue if you want to. It is important, however, that you do join the community group before you post on GitHub. That's a contribution. An issue on GitHub, even a request for something, is a contribution. So please join the community group before you post on GitHub. That is our preferred way also of receiving requests about SMuFL, not via the mailing list, ideally, via the GitHub repository. So please join the community group, which will put you on the mailing list, but then also join GitHub, which is a separate login. You have to go, if you're not already a member of GitHub, you have to go and do that. That's also free. Then you can post an issue in the repo. Yes, Doug?
You already have it?
No, it's obviously as soon as possible. So we'll publish the draft report as soon as we can get the gremlins sorted out. Then there will be a period of time which we will discuss amongst the co-chairs for when we, for feedback, if there is any feedback. And assuming we can action that feedback or there is no feedback, we'll then proceed quickly to release.
Will, because Bravura, the framework for it, will also.
In fact, Bravura is already up to date with all the stuff in the current version of the spec. Yeah.
So hopefully probably a matter of weeks for the review period.
Yeah.
And probably no less than 2. And if there is no discussion in the first 2 weeks, no more than 2.
Indeed. I imagine so. But I certainly don't rule out that we would work on another minor release if there's a critical mass of things that people want and need. Then we can absolutely work on another release. Also, certainly I will undoubtedly end up adding more stuff to Bravura this year. So that would be one reason why we would perhaps then proceed towards another release. So that's actually the end of the slides about SMuFL, but this is a good opportunity if anybody has any questions or things they'd like to discuss about SMuFL and about how that's going, because we're going to move on to MusicXML 3.1 in a moment. So this is always the bit where I'm disappointed because nobody cares about fonts.
Jeff goes.
Yeah. There's no requirement that they should be in any particular format, but as it happens, I believe so far all of the fonts that have been released are all in OpenType format. All the ones that we've done at Steinberg have been not only OpenType, but OpenType with PostScript outlines as well, which is, I think it's kind of the predominant format for fonts these days, really, at least for new fonts. But the nice thing about it is that there isn't really any requirement on what font technology you should use, only that in order to be compliant, you need to be able to have code points in the Unicode private use area in the basic multilingual plane, and ideally that you can have more than 256 glyphs. So, you end up in OpenType, basically. You could use AAT, but again, AAT doesn't have very wide support outside of macOS, so it tends to be OpenType. But as I say, there's no hard requirement in the specification for the format it is in, just what code points it needs to contain, and that ideally it should be a single font with however many ranges you're going to support inside the font. Any other questions about lovely old SMuFL? No?
Yes.
You're all very welcome. I had to do it anyway. And it's just, if it's useful for other people, then that's so much the better. Okay, so we're going to swap seats now.
Yes.
We have some music? Well, no, not really.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, about the Jeopardy.
Well, that's not it. It's more the
No, is that not Jeopardy?
No, that is Jeopardy,
Right,
but that's not what I meant.
Oh, I see. I don't know who wrote
No.
Jeopardy. Right, there we go.
Daniel will now correct all my notes that I took on the SMuFL
You haven't
discussion.
written anything. It's an empty page. You haven't written anything.
No. I probably got all the discussion of your answer to Hans's question wrong. I'll correct them. Okay, so MusicXML. MusicXML status slide, of course, is quite short. We released MusicXML 3.1 December 2017, and since then, I know what I've been busy implementing MusicXML 3.1 features in our products, but we haven't done any updates to MusicXML 3.1. However, over the past few weeks and months, we've started to see some issues, certainly internally in our own business, where we'd like to see MusicXML improvements, and that could lead to a new 3.2 release in 2019 or 2020. So we'll discuss. This is a bit of a change of plan from how the work plan for the group was going, so we want to discuss that here with the group, see that folks are okay with it, or if not okay with it, let's discuss the possibilities. Nothing here is set in stone. So the current plan, subject to change, as I just mentioned, would be to start work on a new MusicXML release in parallel with the ongoing work on MNX. Before, we had tried to wrap up MusicXML 3.1 so that it would not distract from ongoing work on MNX when Joe Berkovitz was leading the group. And Joe had more dedicated time to work on MNX. With the change in co-chairs and Adrian taking over, Adrian has a full-time company to run. So while he can drive MNX, and it's very important to have someone who has someone like Adrian's breadth of understanding to be driving that project, it's probably not going to happen as quickly as we were originally hoping with Joe leading the project. And since MNX is a longer-term project for the next generation of music notation standards, if we still have this room for improvement in MusicXML's core use cases for notation exchange between programs and archiving, it doesn't make sense to freeze that development for MNX. We should be able to do both of these things simultaneously, and they should cross-pollinate each other. Some of the things that I'm going to mention as possible list are things that are related to active topics of discussion for MNX. We may not be able to take the whole MNX solution to a problem and move it into MusicXML, but we can take the ideas and the concepts and see how we can translate them into something that fits in to the MusicXML 3.1 design for a future version. So we also have started to see some misunderstanding on the internet in various chapters that, oh, MusicXML is an obsolete format because it's never going to change after 3.1. They're doing MNX now. And it's like, well, no. MNX certainly wants to make what MusicXML does work better and faster and more reliably. But it's going to be, to do that, it's going to be an incompatible format. It's also not just trying to do, if all we wanted to do was a better MusicXML, an incompatible format may not be such a good idea, but it's driven by a whole bunch of use cases, such as using MNX as a native application format for web applications that MusicXML not only wasn't designed to do, it was explicitly designed not to do it. It was like, we don't want it to be used this way. It's not what it's intended for. We definitely traded off those use cases for the, getting a format standard accepted within the community. Things have changed in 20 years. We don't need to make those trade-offs. MNX can do things in a different way that meet those use cases. And MusicXML's success has paved the way for MNX use cases. But we don't, it's not an either or type of thing. There's still a lot of work to do on, of course, MusicXML to MNX transition and coexistence. But that doesn't mean freezing development of MusicXML nor stopping development of MNX. We should be able to do the two together. One of the great benefits I think Adrian brings to the community, besides being a great musician, a great software engineer, a great guy, is his experience with Python and Python frameworks. Python has gone through this very long and drawn-out transition of moving from Python 2 to Python 3. So Adrian has been in the midst of that and has learned lots of lessons that we want to apply to how to do and how not to do things in a transition of that type. So it'll be great to have his experience there. So here are the key feature ideas just from our, certainly driven from our make music perspective of this is something that's big enough, it seems worth doing another release. I mean, these are certainly not the only issues. We have 92 unresolved issues in the GitHub backlog for MusicXML, and those were things we chose not to address for 3.1. Usually a few have come in since then. So this is hardly, the be-all and end-all of the feature ideas, but it's certainly a motivating force from my perspective and why we might want to have a new release. At Make Music, we're just running into this problem where we have our Finale product and our Smart Music product. We have Finale is this desktop music notation product. Smart Music is a web-based music practice product. We want to have smooth interchange between those two programs. And that's working pretty well for scores. But then when you want to derive part data from the scores, there are changes. There are the changes between the page sizes, page breaks, system breaks, cues, multi-measure rest. Those are just some of the most obvious of many, many changes that can happen between a score and a part. And if you're just trying to automatically derive the part from the score data, you can do a reasonable job, but you're not going to do as good a job as if you were able to take the part data from your favorite notation program and just capture what has already been done manually or automatically, either way, by the program to deal with how you want part laid out based from the score. So it would be great to capture this in a single MusicXML file that could have the score and the parts, have that information and be able to transfer that information back and forth between programs. Probably in terms of the simplest implementation that could possibly work, theory of software design, simple way to do that is to include the full score in MusicXML and then for each part have a full part MusicXML and put all these together in a compressed MusicXML file. Then when your program is reading in the file, it reads in each part and it sees what the differences are between the part and the data in the score, and it represents it the way the notation program represents it, which is very different for each notation program, how that type of differences between score and parts are handled. That gets us, MNX was talking about some different perspectives on that are more in tune with the MNX perspective of a native representation. This type of approach, besides being simpler, is also sort of more in tune with the MusicXML basis for design, which is really trying to model the notation itself rather than an internal model of notation that a software program could use. That's one of the big differences in design between MusicXML and MNX, and reflects the different solutions we might use for each one. A similar issue that comes up is better handling of concert scores that have transposed parts, which MusicXML 3.1 basically throws up its hands and say, I don't know, I can give you a concert score, I can give you transposed parts, you want both of them, it's not going to work too well. That wasn't so bad 20 years ago, it's pretty bad now. So there we might be able to take much more directly some of the ideas from MNX, and can we incorporate them into MusicXML in a way that's compatible with older MusicXML versions and software. In particular, if I have a concert score represented in MusicXML 3.2 and I open it in a program that understands MusicXML 3.1, I think I still want it to be a proper concert score. I don't want a solution where the transpositions are messed up because we added a feature to the transpose format that 3.1 doesn't understand, so it ignores and therefore gets it wrong. We want something that when you read it, you'll be missing, the link between concert score and transposed parts, but the concert score will be correct. The individual transposed part will be correct. It's the linkage being a new feature would not be. So from the Make Music perspective, that's a key pain point that we would like to solve for MusicXML 3.2. And at this point, we have 92 issues in the backlog, and I'm sure we'll be getting to many of them in another release. But this is an opportunity for are there particular other pain points with MusicXML that you think we could be addressing in MusicXML 3.2 rather than needing to wait to MNX to have a more ambitious solution to a problem? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I have not actually vetted the list that's on GitHub because some of the things that are on GitHub are actually like an implementation issue that somebody had with software, and I can actually close that out so that people don't have to review that, but we can put these things as something that are under consideration, but take a rough cut at putting things into a version 3.2 milestone. But feedback on what's important is great.
Ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Daniel and I happened both at Joanne Kane's office this weekend at Disney, and conversion, exactly what you're talking about, scores and parts, is a big issue for both of them because, of course, they don't tell the composers what platform to work on,
Yep.
And yet they have their templates to work on. Do you know if any of the four major houses have seen the list of issues that you're talking about?
You mean the four which
music prep houses?
Have they been part of that conversation?
Greg and one other colleague from Joanne Kane had signed up for this. I don't know what they look like, so I don't know if not here.
But I'm just curious
Mm-hmm.
if up until now, if you knew whether like Greg Jamrow or any of the guys had seen that list of.
I think they are in. Some of them may have been members of the community group, but I would imagine nobody has looked at that list in a long time because nothing has happened for the past year.
Okay.
But welcome you to invite your colleagues to point out, hey, here's this. Please join the community group. Please review this.
Well, that's a good point because last year after this meeting, I was very fired up to the group, and after multiple attempts to try and do it, I gave up.
Contact one of us to help.
Well, thank you for saying that today.
Okay. Yeah, if you have problems with signing up, if you don't have my email or Daniel's email, get a card from us, whatever, contact one of us and we can guide you through the process of doing. Okay, great. Yep, should have mentioned that at the original sign-up point. Thanks for bringing that up.
And I'll also be more than
Yeah,
And
that'd be great. Thank you.
I know that this is, they're getting to the point now where this cross-platform ability for them is make or break.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly important.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of the issues that people are seeing in interchange tend to be issues in the implementation of the interchange. And so, Daniel can do things to help out Dorico's implementation, and I can do things to help out Make Music's implementation. But, it's only the Avid people who can do the Sibelius implementation.
Right.
Anybody can do MuseScore, so, anybody wants to fix up MuseScore. Yeah.
And people understanding having a clarification of common use.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these issues, this is a list of issues that really are problems in the format. The format, no matter what you do as an implementer, if you follow the format, there's going to be a problem because it doesn't support a feature, or the feature is ambiguous or incorrect.
That's my point exactly, because a lot of the requests come from ignorance of the underlying.
Mm-hmm.
If people understand there's a limitation right now, that changes the perspective.
Yep.
So I know in the SMuFL discussion earlier there was a reference for Aura. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's questions or there's back to, and I know XML and people are very different standard, but I'm wondering if there is or maybe there already is, that there is a reference so that when you come up across the platform, there's a ground service guide.
Yep, that's a ever popular question, which we had decided as a couple years ago to postpone that question for MNX, and we would look at having a reference implementation for MNX. I mean, in terms of MusicXML, I think it's safe to say that the Finale implementation is the most mature, but that's not the same thing as a reference implementation. It's not an open source implementation, for one thing. And it's not complete. It doesn't get everything right. It has its own bugs, just like every other implementation has its bugs. So, and it's, MusicXML is a huge format, and that's a lot of work to create a reference implementation for that is both open source and comprehensive, or at least as comprehensive as the commercial implementations that are out there now.
What may be important to consider doing is building up a test suite over time.
Mm-hmm.
That forgetting the reference.
Yep.
Having something that then the people that are implementing could actually follow that test suite and say, oh yeah, we can handle those cases. And that's what we're expecting.
Yeah, and I think that is a much more feasible approach for, because you can, you don't have, it's not an all or nothing thing with a test suite. You can start with, right now we have nothing. So we can get something would be better than nothing, and that can be iterated over time. It could be iterated independent of a MusicXML 3.2 release. I know Daniel's writing that down.
Yeah,
but
what are you doing? You don't need to make notes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is
Why he's writing it.
Yeah, versus the test suites. Because this I will actually see in my notes and go, oh yeah, I was supposed to do something about that versus something online. That's different. Any other discussion? I mean, there's not, I mean, for us, this thing with scoring parts is, pretty like, this is my real pain point. So, but if nobody else has that type of, that's my real pain point, and more like a whole bunch of subtle pain points, that's a somewhat encouraging result. So look, again, this is not the place to collect all issues, just an opportunity. So that's, any other questions on MusicXML before moving to MNX? We can have more, again, MNX and MusicXML in comparison after the MNX as well. So MNX status. We do have the initial draft specification. It's a very incomplete draft, but it's available up on GitHub. I do need to see whether or not that URL is really the latest version of the specification that's been checked in. So, as I mentioned, we did address GitHub issues over the first half of 2018, but not during the second half. That's when Joe was not able to work on that, and we were going through, Joe's not actually going to be able to continue with this. We need to find a new co-chair transition. But in the work that Joe has left us, we believe we have a nice, solid technical foundation for a new next generation format. But there's still a lot of work to do. We have the basics, most of the basics, but there's still a lot of details to fill in. And there's still some very interesting technical issues about how core elements of music should be represented that are open for discussion. Adrian, again, will be co-chair with the primary responsibility for driving MNX forward. So our plans for this coming year, ramp up, let's get back to doing the MNX development in 2019 as Adrian gets up to speed. There's one set of issues that we were discussing at the time that Joe left the group, which was how exactly do we deal with pitch representation with the issue of written and sounding pitch? And Joe made a proposal about realizations and layouts, which get not just pitch representation, but similar things with score and parts that we were discussing in the MusicXML 3.2 area. There's a whole bunch of interconnected issues here that are very important and also quite controversial, not least among the co-chairs who have very strong differences of opinion on where this topic should end up, though perhaps there has been a softening on one of the co-chairs' position.
Yes. I wonder who could have been softening. Yes. It's 2 against 1 now, basically.
So the main issue there being, should music be represented in the written pitch as MusicXML does, or in sounding pitch, as is more common perhaps in a native format for music notation. I mean, either way, you've got to represent the transposition. The transposition would be represented in a very similar way to what MusicXML has now. But what is the starting? What is the fundamental pitch representation that's in the format, and then how do you deal with differences not just in transposition, but all the other differences between parts that we were talking about in the MusicXML section. So we want to actually have a discussion of this and come up with alternatives and plans, discuss this at our Music Messa meeting, and by the time of Music Messa and shortly afterwards, resolve this issue, get that put away so that we can all agree on that, go and move forward for the other remaining issues, because these are probably the most outstanding, the most serious basic technical issue left unresolved in MNX so far. So the Music Messa meeting seems like a good framework to be going through a discussion of that, resolving that. I think some people may be relieved that discussion is a little bit less abstract than our attempt to standardize on layout procedures that we brought up last year.
Yeah.
And after that, we will be going through issues and reviewing things and moving things forward. But there's, with MNX or MusicXML or SMuFL, there is no need to wait for me or Adrian or Daniel to do things. If you have a proposal for MNX solutions, let us know. Put a issue up on, start your own issue discussion, join in issue discussions on GitHub. If you're a developer and you like writing specifications, or even if you're just a spec writer as opposed to a developer, but you're comfortable with GitHub, write up a pull request. If you see issues that are already in GitHub and it looks like they've been discussed and there's consensus and you want to implement it, come up with your implementation for it in the specification and submit it to as a pull request to get things going, because we will need more of a community contribution. You need someone driving it, but the more community contribution we have, the faster we will get this going and get us to a next generation format that could be used much more easily for native applications and many other types of use cases on the web in particular. I don't think, yep, next steps. So let me go back from that. If there are questions about MNX, about the idea of doing MNX and MusicXML development in parallel, if that sounds like a good idea, or if it sounds like, maybe that's not such a great idea.
So my understanding from last year, what I've seen in the meantime, they each have their strengths. And I think that continuing to develop them in parallel so that their strengths can benefit each other is really a pretty good idea. Mm-hmm. But I'm still not 100% sure what. I still didn't get clarification several months ago about the kind of stuff that MNX can actually add to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you are far from the only one who is not clear on this. And one of our first things, I think, in terms of leading up to this type of discussion, I didn't actually put on the bullet point, but I should have, is writing some clarifying documents. Adrian is planning to write a document about just that type of issue, because we're going through a way to frame a document on this pitch representation issue, and Adrian wanted to get, input from folks outside of music notation development community that, have dealt with similar issues in other domains, and what would their perspective be on it. And in doing that, he was framing what MusicXML and MNX was, and I said, that's not exactly the way it is. And he goes, well, gee, if I don't understand it, I don't think lots of other people understand it, and we need to do more. We got to go back to basics about what we are trying to accomplish with MNX. So I think that will be actually a first order of business for the new year. Yep. Or if everybody just has a different understanding.
Right.
Then you think you're making a contribution, but you're just talking past each other.
Right.
Any other questions or discussion about MNX? It seemed like the feeling of the room is that it is a good idea to do MusicXML and MNX development in parallel. If you do not feel that this is a good idea, please raise your point to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is an excellent idea. Thank you, Jeremy. Yep. Mm-hmm. Any other? Yeah, we didn't know if we would need the full 2 hours for discussion. It looks like we won't, but we wanted to provide plenty of time in case we do. So the next steps then, the immediate next step is dinner tonight for folks who have signed up, or even if you haven't signed up, I'm sure we can squeeze a couple more people in. It's at Ty Knockhorn in Garden Grove. There's the address. Be the same room that we were in last year, the room on the left on the side. Request, if you're coming to the dinner, if it's possible for you to bring cash for settling up afterwards, because if we give the restaurant 20 credit cards, we will not be allowed to come back there next year. So we do plan to meet at Music Messe in Frankfurt. Music Messe has changed the dates of the show. Instead of being Wednesday through Saturday, it is now Tuesday through Friday. Don't know. Yeah, I had the same. I don't know why. So I'm not sure what that's going to mean for when people are going to attend, what the best dates are. We'll probably put a poll up for the group in terms of what dates people prefer. However, we are at the just as with NAMM, we rely on the generosity of Music Messe to provide a room for us. And, we've asked for a room. We have not yet heard back. And the dates we get may be, the date that they give us for a room, just because of the lack of availability. Certainly from a U.S. traveler perspective, I'm going to try to avoid Tuesday so that we're not jet lagged. But other than that, Chris? Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or having interim meetings or Zoom or whatever they do.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the way I would characterize the meetings is that we certainly take them as a kind of directional steer in terms of what we're going to do. But really, the decisions are made issue by issue in GitHub. And of course, I also understand that, a lot of people in this room are very busy people, and so you maybe don't want to read every issue on GitHub. And I agree that I think what we should try to find a way of doing is providing some kind of digest that would be easy for people who maybe can't be plugged into every issue to sort of have a sense of where things are standing and so on. Because obviously between April and January, we don't have anything in the calendar that allows us to get together because there's no big event that we're all already going to. And so, but obviously
We could schedule a couple of online meetings.
I mean, we have certainly talked about that as a possibility, because actually the three co-chairs, we meet every 2 weeks to discuss status and to go over issues. And
That's
So-
good, because I don't have I'm not allowed to do Zoom meetings at a commercial level because I'm not an official. I don't. It costs money for my license.
No,
but if you can do it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've had 100 classes.
Yeah, that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And especially not being able to get in. So if we can
Yeah.
help.
yeah. Yeah, I don't,
Even if maybe those
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
people with full-time jobs,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the W3 structure is still a little bit of a mix.
Sure.
But I know that on the W3C web audio platform, there's two different lists.
Yep.
The level they want to be involved. One
That's
is kind
right.
of a public list for a
Yep.
community group. The other one has the agenda for those bi-weekly.
Right.
I enjoy being on both of those lists. I rarely respond, but I at least see what's on them. And maybe you have that already. And I'm not a member.
No,
of
we don't actually.
No.
We don't publish an agenda for our meeting. To be honest, we could maybe look into doing that. Although typically what we will be doing, not like it's any secret or anything. Typically each of us will give a status update on the project that we're working on. We don't necessarily have an update planned in advance. It's more like where are we at?
The web audio ones usually they're like lines long.
Sure.
Like super
Yeah.
high detail level, but
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
particular things that are
Stuff
actually
are happening.
happening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
A prompt to go look at
Yep.
GitHub.
Yep. I think that's. I mean, we could maybe even send a brief summary of each co-chair meeting. Maybe we could rotate between the three of us writing up a few lines on what we discussed. I mean, obviously, the goal is that we want to make the process as transparent as possible, which is why we do everything on GitHub, because that way, everything, obviously, we when we first started on GitHub, I know that we turned off a lot of the community because everything resulted in an email. And it took a while for us to kind of balance so now I think emails go out for pull requests, which basically means that an issue has come to a point where something's about to get into the spec, which seems like a good point to then hopefully people, even if they haven't been switched on to that point, then they can go, oh right, that's a real thing then, and I should read that pull request. But I also know that some members of the community started filtering the GitHub emails into like auto delete effectively.
Mhm.
That if you're one of the people who did that, please consider undoing that or going back into GitHub and re-enabling email notifications, because it sends very, very many fewer notifications from GitHub. It used to be you get one for every comment, everything. Now you'll only get notifications for pull requests, and that means that if you do have your GitHub notifications set up, then you'll see the actual items of things that are actioned in the specs as they happen. Obviously, when we want to draw attention to something, we will also send something out, both as a blog post on the W3C community group page and on the public contrib mailing list as well. There's no hard and fast rule about what should and shouldn't go on that mailing list. As you're a member of the group, you can post that mailing list. But again, for the purposes of keeping the audit trail clear, particularly when it comes to contributions on issues, it's just much better if it goes on GitHub. And what I will do, for example, if somebody posts stuff to do with SMuFL on the list, I'm just going to go and create a GitHub issue anyway and put your name in it. So it's better to do stuff via GitHub. It's very, very clear then. So we can then track things in milestones, i.e. which release we're planning on thinking about something. You can see whether anybody's looked at something, because we will, as the co-chairs, will also leave an update, even if we've only had a little discussion. We will put an update that sort of gives the status of what we're thinking about, even on the way to the point where we're ready for a pull request. So it is a bit of work to keep up with, and we definitely want to find ways to make it lower maintenance for people to be able to see what's happening and to contribute. But so I think the idea of a digest and of our agendas, I think those are good ideas, and we'll certainly discuss those and see if we feel between the three of us that we can action those. Because transparency is the name of the game, and we're not doing anything in secret, but maybe we're not communicating things we're doing well enough. So
and easier ways to get folks engaged in a more continuous basis. There are also some good ideas about like simulcasting of the meetings. That generally doesn't work because we have no budget for these things, and internet's unreliable at these shows anyway.
Interim meetings.
Yeah. Oh, the interim Zoom is one thing, but I'm talking about meetings at the shows being simulcast or videocast. We're very grateful for Philip's work in videoing the meetings and sharing them, and similarly, the MuseScore team has done a lot of those for the Music Mesa meetings, and those have been greatly appreciated. Lots of folks have told us how there are folks who do go through the entire 2-hour meetings and discussions and are very happy to have that available, and the teams have made them. Philip and Peter have made them available very shortly after the shows, and that's been awesome. Thanks so much for the contribution to the community. We may take you up on that. Mm-hmm. Do people here use Slack? A lot of Slack. Maybe we can. I have no idea what it takes to set up a Slack channel outside of an that's not organization specific, but
I think you can just create a free one.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could.
But we can certainly look at having a Slack channel for. We probably have to have several Slack. There's the W3C Slack channel, and there's music notation random. Just judging by how Slack usage happens in our company.
Is there anything else related to any of the activities of the group or to MusicXML or anything that anybody would like to raise? This is a rare opportunity where we're all in the same room. And I know obviously people are also tired and maybe want to go and get a coffee or something, but we're here. Is there anything that springs to mind from anybody that would be worth raising in the forum, even if it's not directly related to any of the things that we've talked about here? But
I have a question.
Sure.
That somebody asked me the other day and I couldn't answer. What's the difference between a compressed and an uncompressed XML file for the purpose of anything? And I said, I don't know.
The compressed one is 20 times smaller, so it takes up less disk space, but it also has images, and it could have sound, and it could have parts, but in practical purposes, what it has is graphics. especially if you're doing Finale work and you want to have your graphics go back and forth, the Finale implementation will save graphics into
This
the.
person was asking me about converting a purchased PDF. Save it. So I didn't have an answer.
Yeah, it doesn't. For most applications, it doesn't matter. Use whichever one your program defaults to, and it's fine. In most cases, because I think most applications are now supporting MXL as well as XML and .MusicXML. No, I mean it's short. I mean it takes up less disk space, and if you're in Finale, you're using images, but we changed it to use the compressed format as the default.
I guess the question is, if what you're doing is going to result in a file which you can then dump in a minute, what difference?
It doesn't.
Unless you have images, yeah.
Unless what?
Unless you have like images in the Finale
unless you have
file.
images and you're using Finale, because no other program, as far as I know, imports the images that are in the MusicXML file. So,
I knew that.
of course you would know. The Grand Wizard of MusicXML. We are in his presence.
Wait a minute. Those words
do those words not work? In this country? Okay. I'm sorry.
I knew him before he was.
Those have some negative content.
Okay, yeah. Apologies for my British ignorance. It's one of many things I'm ignorant about. Good, well, that's easy then. So we're done, are we?
Hallelujah.
2%. There we go. Couldn't have gone any better. Well, thank you.